The first bolt struck so near that the spears in our hands rang like iron, though they were only wood. Rain stung my eyes, yet I saw the river turn black beneath the flash, as if the water itself recoiled. Then the thunder rolled aside, and something vast moved within the white glare above us, its wet feathers scattering sparks like embers across the terrified faces of my men. Men have pressed me in the years since to tell how the warriors of KwaZulu dropped their shields and fled that night. If this tale holds your ear, give it your favor, speak your thoughts below, and remember my name among your other fireside stories. It began 3 weeks earlier in the season when the storms rose from the sea and walked inland along the Uthongati River. It was the year of our ancestors that you would name 1700, when the Zulu were still many small clans watching the horizons, more for other men than for things from the sky. I was then a young man called Mkabela Kandlovu, a spear leader under Chief Mvuyana, and I believed there was no terror that a strong arm and a keen assegai could not master. We had taken 20 men north from our homestead, near the hills you now call Inanda. Our task seemed simple. Lightning had torn several cattle from a kraal during a night storm, leaving them dead where they stood, eyes burst, hides unmarked by any spear or tooth. The elders spoke of Impundulu, the lightning bird of the old tales, but the chief desired proof that it was only the sky and not witchcraft sent against his wealth. He sent us to watch the grazing lands and to calm the people with a show of spears. We carried shields of cowhide, I still smelling of smoke from the curing fires, stabbing spears and knob kerries. Our only iron lay in a few old trade knives and the brass wire some of us wore about our wrists. We had no gun, for the Dutch at the Cape were still far, and their powder spoke seldom in our country. The storms themselves were army enough. That first night, we camped beside a stand of fever trees above the river. The air tasted of metal and wet dust, a sign that the sky would soon open. I sat with my closest companion, Sifiso, sharing a twist of tobacco in a clay pipe. His face shone in the firelight, and when he spoke of his wife, who carried their first child, his voice softened in a way I rarely heard. "You will return," I told him, passing the pipe. "The child will learn your praise names from your own mouth." He laughed and knocked his shield with his knuckles. "Not even the sky itself would dare strike this ugly face," he said. The others around the fire answered with quiet jests of their own, speaking of the beer waiting at home, of the girls who would praise our courage when we returned. In those early hours, fear had no place among us. The first sign came 2 nights later. We had driven the cattle into a sheltered hollow and posted watches along the ridge. The storm ran south of us that evening, its flashes distant, yet the thunder reached us in dull, heavy blows. I walked the line, listening to the cattle shift and cough in the dark. Above the storm's murmur, I heard another sound, faint yet clear, like the flapping of many vultures. It rose and fell in a measured beat, not frantic as in feeding, but steady as the paddling of a canoe. I stopped and listened harder, but the sound slid away along the clouds. I told myself it was only the wind striking the tall grass and said nothing to the men. On the 5th day, we found the first tracks. They lay in a patch of wet soil near the riverbank, where one of the herd boys had sworn he saw a shadow pass between him and the sun. The marks were 3 clawed like those of a large bird, yet each print was as long as my forearm. They sank deep as though made by great weight, but they continued only for 5 steps and then ended in smooth earth, as if the creature had taken to the air. Sifiso squatted beside them, pressing his palm into the mud for measure. "An ostrich can leave such a mark," he said, "though no ostrich walked in that country. Perhaps it ran, then leaped away." "Where are the running prints then?" asked Langa, the quietest of our band, who watched the sky more than other men. He pointed to the tall reeds. If it had flown from here, they would be broken. They stand unbent. His words drew a shiver along my arms, but I wrapped it in reason. "The river swelled in the night," I said. "The water must have washed away the other marks." Even as I spoke, I knew the river had fallen, not risen, yet none of us wished to name the thing that those prints suggested. We moved the cattle farther inland and told the herd boy to keep his stories soft. The days grew heavier. The storms no longer followed the wide paths we expected from years of watching the sky. They circled us like hunting dogs, sometimes grumbling just beyond the hills, sometimes exploding above our heads without warning. At night, the cattle rolled their eyes and pulled at their tethers, straining toward the thorn thickets as if something waited at the open ground. One evening, as the sun sank copper red behind the Drakensberg, the whole valley felt suddenly quiet. The chattering weaver birds in the reeds stilled in the same breath, and the frogs along the riverbank hushed as if a hand had closed upon their throats. I remember lifting mine spear, not because I saw anything, but because the absence of sound weighed upon my chest like many stones. "It is only that the storm is near," I said aloud, though no man had asked me. My own voice sounded foolish in that great silence. Then, from far above the cloud, there rolled a deep, slow boom. Not the sharp crack of ordinary thunder, but something longer, almost like a call. The cattle bolted against their ropes, and one snapped its tether and fled into the brush before we could stop it. Only later did I notice that the boom had come not with a flash, but alone, as if the light had been swallowed. We slept little after that. Men who had laughed around the fire now sat with their backs to one another, watching the sky. Langa began to murmur old prayers, ones our fathers said before the Njomane Wars. Sifiso stayed close to me, his jokes growing forced. On the 10th night, the micro-shock came. The storm had broken early, rain lashing sideways, our fire reduced to a choking glow beneath an overhang of rock. We huddled together, shields over our heads. I had taken from my pouch a small charm my mother had given me, a twist of red cloth with herbs inside, more for comfort than belief. A lightning flash tore the world white, and in that instant, every shield rim, every spearhead, every brass bangle upon our arms blazed with cold fire. A terrible shriek burst from directly above us, so loud that my ears rang. It was not human, yet it caught and twisted a sound like our own war cry within it. At the same moment, all the spears in our hands grew burning hot, not with flame, but with a biting heat that forced us to drop them into the mud. The night closed again, black and shaking. For a long while, no man spoke. I heard only the rain hissing upon the rocks and our own ragged breathing. Sifiso was the first to find his tongue. There was nothing in the sky, he said. The flash blinded us. The cry was only thunder, yet his hands trembled as he rubbed the wet clay from his palms, and none of us reached immediately for our spears lying in the muck. When we did, their shafts felt strangely cold, as if they had been taken from a deep river. From then on, the evidence piled like storm clouds. We found a goat torn from the herd, its body not ripped open, but laid flat upon the earth, all the blood drawn from it. There was no wound, only a small blackened mark upon its neck, as though a great beak had pierced once and cleanly. Around it, the grass stood untouched. The smell arrived next. It drifted upon the wind before the storms, a rank mixture of damp feathers, burnt hair, and something older, like the inside of a long-abandoned kraal. I smelled it first while walking the perimeter at dusk. It wrapped about me without direction, neither from river nor hills, and then vanished as the first heavy drops began to fall. I said nothing that night, for I wished still to be a man of reason, and not of childish tales. But I woke in darkness to find Langer crouched beside me, his hand upon my shoulder. His eyes glimmered like those of a hunting owl. "You smell it also," he whispered. We built no more large fires after that, for the lightning seemed to hunt them. Bolts struck close whenever the flames climbed high, shattering nearby trees, throwing splinters across the camp. So we cooked over low coals, or not at all, shrinking from the open ground. Our world narrowed to the circle of our shields and the restless breathing of the cattle. On the 12th day, we tried to move south, away from the strange storms, but the sky herded us back. Each path we chose soon filled with black cloud and flickering light, while the ground behind remained comparatively clear. I marked this uneasily. It felt as though some great herdsman urged us toward a place of his choosing. That night, we reached the valley that men now call Ezimvu, the place of the sheep, though no tame beast walks there any longer. We tethered the cattle beneath a rocky slope and crowded ourselves under an outcrop. The storm already grumbled in the distance. The air pressed hot and thick against my skin. As full darkness settled, a new sound joined the thunder. It came not from above, but from every side, a low rustling as of many wings beating just out of sight. The cattle pressed together, their eyes rolling white. I felt the hairs rise along my arms. Then the wings ceased, and with their passing came a complete stillness. Even the rain paused. Into that hollow fell a single clear note, like the cry of a bird seen at sunrise along the river, sweet and familiar. It was the call Sifiso always gave when returning from a scouting run, so that we knew his voice. I turned, expecting to see him step from the darkness nearby, but he stood already at my side, his face drained of color. The same call sounded again, this time from behind us, perfect in every rise and fall. It carried a question within it, an invitation. "It knows our voices," Langer breathed. We drew close then, shields overlapping, spears lifted. The third call came from directly above our heads. There followed a flash so fierce that the air itself seemed torn away. For a heartbeat, I saw everything more clearly than in daylight. The valley floor shone like a bowl of polished bone, every rock outlined in blue fire. Above us hung a shape as large as the chief's great hut, wings spread from ridge to ridge. Its feathers stood bristling and wet, each tipped with tiny sparks. The head bent downward, and in its hooked beak, I saw the glisten of fresh blood. The eyes I remember least clearly, though they burned the longest in my mind. They shone not with steady light, but like many small fires dying and flaring within deep coals. When they fell upon our faces, the skin along my cheeks tightened as if dry, though the rain already pelted down once more. The vision ended with the lightning. darkness crashed back, followed by a roar of thunder from within the valley itself, not from above. Wind hammered us flat. In that confusion, a scream rose behind me, horribly short, and another of our number vanished. No body fell. There was only the whipping of disturbed air and the clatter of a dropped spear. We broke. Years of training, songs of courage, praise names sung on the march, all fell away like burnt leaves. We fled the valley in scattered groups, men who had run into assegais without flinching, now stumbling through bush and stone in blind terror. I remember only fragments of that escape. Siphisos' hand gripping my wrist so tightly that his nails cut my skin. Langa shouting words I could not hear under the storm, the sensation of rain suddenly turning to warm mist as if passing through breath. At one point, as we scrambled across a slope slick with mud, the storm stopped following. I realized too late that I heard no thunder behind us, no wing beat, only the labored rasp of our lungs. I risked a glance back. The valley lay half hidden by driving rain. For a moment, lightning edged the clouds but did not break. Within that dull glow, I thought I saw the great wings fold slowly as a heron folds before sleep. Whether I truly saw this or my mind shaped it from terror, I will never know. We staggered into the homestead of Chief Mvuyana at dawn, drenched and shivering, fewer by 5 than when we had left. The people gathered about us, their faces hungry for news. We spoke of storms, of cattle lost to flashes of the sky, of men taken by rockfalls and swollen rivers. We gave the chief the wound truth, but not the bone. Mvuyana listened with that careful stillness which had kept our clan alive through hard seasons. Finally, he said, "You speak of Impundulu as though it were flesh. Men die in storms. Cattle fall. We need not give our fear a beak and wings." He ordered a scribe among the elders to mark the matter in our memory sticks as misfortune brought by an unusual season of lightning. No sacrifices were made beyond those already offered to soothe the ancestors. Officially, the tale ended there. Yet among ourselves, the unspoken knowledge grew heavier. At night, when the fires were low and only trusted ears were near, we spoke softly of the tracks that began and ended in open ground, of the cries that stole our own voices, of the spears that burned without flame. Some insisted that it had been witchcraft from a rival clan, shaped to appear as the lightning bird. Others muttered that no witch would dare bind such a thing. The years moved. I took a wife, later another, fathered sons, and buried a daughter. My spear hand stiffened with age, yet the storms never again sounded to me as they had to other men. When the first rumbles rolled across the hills each summer, my stomach clenched as it had in youth. And my children mocked my caution, until one night they saw my face whiten at a certain long, low boom from above and fell respectfully silent. Twice I sought to return to that valley. The first time, 5 years after the event, I went with Langa. We chose clear weather, carrying only walking sticks. The paths we remembered had changed, overgrown with bush. Birds called freely, and no smell of burnt feather tainted the breeze. Yet, when we reached the hills that should have overlooked Azimvu, a strange haze filled the low ground beyond, though the sun stood bright above. Not fog, not smoke, something between. Langa halted. "We are not meant to see it," he said. Without speaking further, we turned back. That night, a storm slammed the homestead, lightning striking a tree mere paces from my own hut. though no such storm had been seen that far inland in years. The second attempt came much later, when my hair had begun to grey at the temples. Sifiso and I walked alone this time. He had lived with the memory as I did, waking sometimes with his hand clamped on his wife's arm, thinking he still clutched my wrist in flight. We were both determined to find some ordinary mark that would let us call that night a dream exaggerated by youth. We never found the valley. Paths that our feet knew in the dark seemed to twist under us. A ridge that should have taken half a morning to cross stretched into afternoon without end. At last we stood upon a rock and saw in the far distance a single flash touch down where we believed Azimvu lay, though the sky above it held no cloud. On the wind came a faint call, imitating exactly the whoop our young boys gave when driving goats. Sifisos' face folded upon itself. "I will not go farther," he said. We kept our silence after that. Among the younger men, our tale became a thing half believed, half mocked. The official account in the chief's house still names that season only as the year of many storms. I have never sought to change those words. What proof could I offer beyond these failing eyes and the scars on my wrist, where Sifisos' nails once bit deep? Now that my steps slow and my world shrinks to the shadow of my own hut, small things awaken that old dread. Once, as I watched my grandson play with a carved wooden bird, he cried out in perfect mimicry of my own whistle used to summon the cattle. For a heartbeat, the room dimmed, though the fire burned steady. I smelled damp feathers and burnt hair, and my hand closed hard upon the mat. On another evening, while we sheltered from a sudden storm, my eldest son joked that the lightning would snatch away our goats, as it had in his grandfather's time. When the next flash came, his words repeated from outside the hut in his exact voice, syllable for syllable, though he sat beside me in the dark. The goats bleated once, and then fell oddly still for the rest of the night. What name shall I give such things after so many years? A man grows old with his questions. Had I understood, when we first found those impossible tracks by the river, how deep their shadow would fall, I might have urged the chief to move our kraals far from those hills. Or perhaps it would not have mattered at all. You may say that we saw only storm and fear, that men under such skies will conjure any shape from lightning and cloud. Perhaps you are right. Yet when the thunder drags long upon the earth, like the cry of a vast bird seeking roost, I still feel the skin of my cheeks dry as if in sudden heat, and the scars upon my wrist itch as though new. On such nights, I sit alone under the overhang where no lightning has struck since my youth, and I listen for wings that beat just beyond hearing. Last summer, during a storm that others called ordinary, a calf was found dead at the edge of our kraal, its blood gone, its neck marked by a single blackened hole, the grass around it untouched and dry.